welcome to the third episode of The Weekly Pleb. My name is Douglas Rieger, and I'm your host. I hope everyone has been having a fantastic holiday season. I know it's been a rough year, and some people are celebrating over Zoom, but I hope it's been a reminder of the important parts of this time of year. Whether you celebrate Christmas morning on the 25th or a few days later because you're stuck in quarantine, spending time with your family and the people you care about is what the season is all about. The second most important thing, however, is of course eating some delicious food. That's why this week I talked to a food scientist from General Mills about the current state of the restaurant industry as well as the history and future of food itself. Anybody who knows me knows that I love good food, so this conversation was super interesting, and I hope you guys come away from it with a better appreciation for the things you eat. Without further ado, let's get right into the interview. My guest expert today is General Mills food scientist and culinarian, William Beacom. How are you, William?
I'm well, thank you for having me. This is our host, Douglas, by the way, everyone. So shout out to Douglas for hosting me here on this program.
Hopefully they know that already. If not, hopefully they stick around. So you are probably my most famous guest yet, considering you've been on David Letterman, right?
This was in 2004. I promise you that my 15 minutes of fame I spent too early in life. Yeah.
So how come you were on David Letterman?
I'm a duct tape expert. I would teach children how to make items out of duct tapes at libraries as a part of summer reading programs when I was in high school, and it just blossomed from there. This was in the early YouTube days, so we didn't have that kind of there was the beginning of that kind of viralness you get. So I went viral. I was on the front page of YouTube, so that was pretty awesome, and I was able to book a lot of gigs from it. It's been a nice piece of trivia about myself for icebreakers since then.
Yeah, I mean, it's an icebreaker right here, right? I mean, I remember when I lived in Michigan and I was in elementary school. You came to my elementary school and did your whole presentation.
I did, yeah. Blessed Sacrament.
Yeah, you
My
did.
mom still
Yeah,
works
you
there.
did.
She's hit 20 years. She's worked there this month, I believe.
So, what is it that we had a biomedical engineer on for the last episode, and he was talking about GMOs and a bit about food, but mostly the human aspect of it. So, what does a food scientist do?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's important to remember that all those advances and those little tricks that you have in a kitchen, somebody spent time doing it 50 different ways to give you that little cooking hack. And there's a lot of that information that's out there, and it's tomed in old cookbooks. But I think with the internet age and what we have now, and just how quickly a food trend can go viral, a food scientist, it can be someone who's working on quality control, someone like me who's working on research and development on the creative side, but it can also be someone exploring the future of food and looking at where we can source protein or how we can better impact the environment with our processes. There's so much invested right now in that side, and it's really great to see it be more collaborative. I think in the past, especially with agriculture and food, you had people growing stuff and then people that were trying to make food stuff and they weren't really on the same page. So we're kind of seeing more collaboration with how we care for our land and get what we need to get food out versus kind of that reductionist approach of just how much weight of corn can we, however they measure that productivity. So it's been interesting at General Mills to see that side where they're really working to try to close that gap and have everybody on the same page so we only take what we need and give back more.
Cool. So your field has a direct impact on making our agricultural industry more efficient for the future.
I think so. Yeah, I think as someone who's a chef and worked the line, I started at Jimmy John's. I've done a lot of food things. I've been a butcher, line cook, a kitchen manager, sous chef, fine dining. The whole gamut there. We can get into more of that later if you'd like, but uh, it's really hard. It's a really hard job, and you're really focused on pleasing your customers every day, and it's you don't get the same opportunities to look at the bigger picture and maybe come up with some solutions that take some more time that you do working as a food scientist. We're still thinking about food all the time in that moment that we have with food, but it's nice to be able to kind of slow the pace down and really focus on larger problems versus worrying about if I have enough dishwashers for the weekend, or if my meat order is coming in late, or if I have enough line cooks for the resis on the books. Like there's just it's a grind. It's a challenging job. It's very rewarding, but it is. I really enjoy this kind of slower pace and larger kind of picture, bigger problems perspective now. My background though is tremendously helpful because you get caught up in the abstract and you forget that these are real people eating food and trying to feed their kids and have a good time with their families, celebrations, hard days, needing just a little quick food. So there's all these food moments that are constantly happening around us, and just trying to understand those and unravel those stories is really exciting.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. It's a very poetic way to put it, I guess. So, what you said you like the fact that you're working on big projects now, it's bigger picture stuff. So, what's the coolest or most interesting project that you've been working on lately?
Ooh, my scope is kind of small. I'm working on Nature Valley. So we're just working on some snacks for people. Obviously, with the pandemic, people are staying home more, so we're seeing a change in just eating behavior that I believe, in my own opinion, that it's going to really change how people eat in years to come. Because this wasn't like a 6 week thing. This wasn't a month. We're going to be going on over a year. So how people eat, it's already changed, and we're working to understand what that means, and how we can better serve our consumers and give them that food for that moment they're looking for. But then also just the larger shift, obviously sugar. You know, people, scientists, a lot of people coming out, sugar's bad. So how can we address that in our products? And then uh, what are we going to be snacking on when we all go back to work and things get back to normal? So we're ready to go back to normal, but we're never going to go back to normal. It's going to be a future normal, and it's going to be interesting to see how my job is a part of that, and trying to understand what we can do better to give you that moment. And it's as just someone who loves food, it's going to be very interesting to see if we have improved as a nation at cooking and feeding our families, or if we are going to go back to just really supporting restaurants in this kind of extinction event in this restaurant industry right now. And I think you'll see a little bit of both. But if I had to really say one thing, it would be the food insecurity in America, and how uh, people aren't being able to get enough food. They're not getting the financial support they need from the government during this time. It's going to really change how people view food, especially in those areas that are hardest hit. It's going to be really interesting. I think I really hope that the issue of like a food desert, or all these like how do we just get food to people that need it, you know? And that problem's only gotten worse. So I really hope that we can kind of fast forward 5, 10, 15 years with the solutions we were already heading towards. But with the dire situation we have, I really hope that we can find those solutions sooner and get impactful policy change. And there's so much you can do on so many levels, from just donating food, donating time, writing your senator. There's so much work that needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure anyone who's paying attention has seen the massive food lines all over the U.S. lately because of everything going on. So basically, what you're saying is that people are either cooking at home because they're staying at home, or for reasons of staying at home, or because they just don't have the money to go out, right?
And where you can't really go out and have that same experience too. So I think that's important. Like when if you have a family of four and you're going out, that's maybe like a once a week thing. If you're like I'm just hit 30. For me, it's a dinner date with my girlfriend. But it's, people, we go out for different reasons, and I think there's a huge chunk of people that just aren't going to go back out again because they can't afford to.
Yeah. So you think? I mean, I have a similar feeling to you that the restaurant industry is seriously going to be hurt by this. Like, I think I saw some statistic that something like 40% of small businesses are expected to shutter for good, at least, and that's huge it's a massive impact on the economy. So I mean, what do you see as steps forward after this pandemic? How do we get people back comfortable going back out to restaurants, and how do we support small businesses that are trying to operate?
Yeah, wow, what we're seeing is it's bigger than just the food industry. I think so that I'll say that first. It's really anyone who's working in those low paying jobs where you can't work remotely, which is a lot of, there's manual labor involved, there's customer service involved, going to an arena to when you're at an airport on your trips, like all of that, I think will come back a little bit faster. But it's those people that work their whole lives, those mom and pop shops, this is people's livelihoods. They've done the right things. They've paid their taxes. They've provided excellent service. These are people that have done well, and when you take their livelihood away, they're going to be wanting answers, and they're never going to be able to forgive that. So you're basically like killing someone professionally when you like if you're a chef and your restaurant's gone and you've done everything right, and like what do you do next? What do you tell that person? Oh, sorry, we couldn't bail your restaurant out, but we got, you can go to McDonald's or any of these big companies because they can withstand the COVID-19 and all that. So I if I was in their situation, it's like, what did I pay all these taxes for? All these taxes. I mean, obviously it's helping their with unemployment for their employees, but that's not really that'd be it's like you're failing and it's not your fault, and the cognitive dissonance from that, what is going to come of those people, because you just created an army of foodie activists that are going to want change. um, on a bigger level, I really hope that it changes the restaurant model. I don't agree with the tipping model, the difference in pay for back and front of house workers, and I also don't agree with how ownership can like there's this kind of like perpetuated mythology on TV of this hard ass owner, and this whole really negative work culture that gets perpetuated. I really hope that it kind of gets normalized to have a mental health day and take sick time. To be working 60, 80 hours, 100 hours a week is not is nonsensical. I is a big reason why I left food, and I don't think that anyone who's had this time off wants to go back to that restaurant model. But again, it all goes back to the consumer. You vote with your dollar. People are still buying takeout and they're doing what they can. People are still opening restaurants. I know a couple here that have opened and they're being successful with takeout. It's just that how do you change to fit these times? We're seeing takeout laws change, people being able to sell booze to go finally, and that's something that liquor stores and they didn't. No one wants that. The bars don't want that, but now it's here, and hopefully it stays. There's just so many things you can do to generate revenue off selling food, but there's so many limitations, and every city's different with their codes. Even for like when food trucks came out, all the hurrah around the restaurants being mad because they have to pay the property tax and the truck stuff. So I'll back up though, but just that how we can address that model and make it so everyone gets paid a livable wage, has access to the health insurance and the health services they need, feels able to take time for themselves and support their family. Not You don't want people to feel like they have to go to work sick in order to make ends meet. That is a failure of our government, and I've been in that situation, and I've had employees in that situation, and if they don't go to work, they can't make rent. And what am I to do? It's a really difficult spot to be as someone's boss, and it's also just a difficult thing to see as a human being. It's really tragic.
Own personal experience. I worked in a couple hot kitchens for the better part of a year in high school, and I totally get it. Like all the cooks I worked with, I was on the line, but all the cooks I worked with, they were there were some there that had worked there for like 20 years, and they were still getting like 13.50 an hour or something like that. I knew one woman, her name was Amparo, and her son worked at EG's, which is like a little smoothie place here kind of thing. It's like an ice drink. It's a local shop, but he's making more than 15 an hour as a manager after 3 years, and his mom is cooking in a hot kitchen long hours for much less. So, I mean, there's definitely something wrong with the structure of restaurants already. And I think that there are a lot more out of work chefs than people realize, because not only are the restaurants closing, but a lot of the chefs really get tired of the work or the traditional work, and they try to figure out other ways to get around that. And like you were saying, it's difficult with the code laws. I know I started a cooking business this year, and part of it involves having the cooks go cook for people at their houses, and like it's been a logistical nightmare trying to figure out how to make that legal and up to code and everything like that. So I know that there are a lot of barriers to entry for small business, and I think that's part of the problem too.
And it's the people
But
that are scrappy that are selling tamales outside a gas station, or like those are the people that are getting like stopped by the police. It's ridiculous. Like I just really it, we always hear in America like, oh, I wish we had better food, especially in some of these smaller towns, and then you get it and they don't like how oh well we everyone gets upset. But I do have a story. Yeah, I have a kind of a historical perspective story on this extinction event. So but this is over 100 years ago with the Volstead Act. The Volstead Act effectively killed fine dining and really any kind of steakhouse. Everything had to go to private clubs, and if they couldn't financially do that, which is understandable, obviously the clubs lived in Washington D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Boston. These are kind of old established places. Um, that extinction event wiped out any kind of American like heritage of a fine dining breed like you see in France. So that was a question I had when I was learning how to cook. Is like, where's our like great American chefs that have passed the torch generation to generation? Well, they existed. You can read about them. There's a great book called Cullinarians. It goes through and it's a biography on hundreds of people that are involved in food in American history of all walks of lives. People that were enslaved, people that were indentured servants, where these people came from, their stories. I love the book. It's so amazing to kind of read about someone's life that did what I did and kind of pay respect to them because we stand on their shoulders in the kitchen. It's always passing the torch. So what we have now, 100 years later, is another extinction event. I will add the Spanish flu definitely had to have an impact. It's hard to say. They just didn't write about food like we do now back then. But yeah, you had the Spanish flu, the Volstead Act. Um, it wiped everything out. And now, flash forward to now, it's again something out of our control that is impacting all levels of society. Um, we won't have prohibition in the next 10 years, so that should help them. We can sell to go cocktails now, but what we will end up with is it's something we can only kind of dream up now. And I really hope that the dreamers get their opportunity to kind of reimagine what a restaurant. I mean, it's already happening right now. I'm sure. Like my friend Gustavo, he's a Mexican chef, and he's opened a spot. They're doing to-go food. He's making 1,200 tortillas a day. He's trying to just make tortillas for all the new spots around here that want that fresh masa, that fresh tortilla. And he's making a go of it, and it's his dream, and he's doing it now, which sounds like, why would you do that, right? But he had a line around the block the other day. He just had a baby. This pandemic isn't slowing him down, and the people like that are out there grinding, I love it, man. So passionate. That's all his dream was, to see people in a line outside of his shop in America, and he finally made his dream come true after working for other people uh, for so long. It's just incredible. I'm so happy for him that in a moment of darkness we can see that. But that's one guy and one family. Not everyone can do that or uh, can take on that risk, so it's gonna be interesting. We have all these. You just turn everyone into an activist. I would say that's involved with food. So hopefully we see some change from that.
yeah, I mean, hopefully, I mean, there are more people like Gustavo, and and that's great because we need them. They're vital to keeping the economy going during this time. And I mean, there is going to be a massive demand and open market for small business after this. So, like you said, it'll be interesting to see how restaurants change. Like what kind of restaurant business the future will have, like with advancements like Uber Eats and stuff like that, where DoorDash, people can just bring your food to your door. I feel like since we're a convenience driven society, there's going to be just more of that. And it's going to be kind of more convenient to get your fine dining experience somehow. And that's kind of where I had the idea to have the chefs going to people's houses, but we'll see, I guess, right?
We'll see. Your
So,
comments make me think of Japan, like because you can really get some really great food at those little spots, and I think what we will see is kind of an adoption maybe of some of these other things that work from other cultures, and that kind of we don't need to sit down with a tablecloth, and have that whole service to really enjoy some good food.
yeah. I mean, when it all comes down to it, the taste is what people remember, right? It doesn't matter how it looks, where you're at, whatever it is. The food is what people what lasts in your head. You remember how good that damn food was.
I was told by a old chef, people go out to be recognized. People want to be recognized. That's why you dress up and you go, and that's why you go to the host and they see you, and they bring you water. People want to be recognized. This is why we go out to parties, not even if it's by strangers or friends. That's the bottom line. So give them attention. So I think people are craving that kind of interaction as well, because I believe that everyone has a third place. You have your home, your work, maybe whatever it is for you, church, yoga, whatever, and then you have a third place that can be like a coffee shop or a brewery, wherever you go, that is kind of in between. I think people are kind of really missing their third place during this pandemic, and some people have lost that place forever. So it's going to be interesting how people have kind of reestablished themselves in their communities after all this.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of human nature, right? To be kind of social animals and be part of the community, be seen with the people that you live around. But I mean, in times that are so tense like lately, I feel like that makes it even more scary that people are not getting the social interactions that they might need to be able to act normal and maybe not go rioting in streets or something like that, right?
Yeah, well, and then people get, like I've gotten pretty comfortable at home. It's kind of nice here. So I think there's a mix of that too, where maybe things will happen a little earlier. You won't have that 10:30 dinner dinner rush anymore. I think people are kind of used to going to bed early too.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone's getting used to. Everyone's turning into old people, going to sleep early, waking up early. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I've gotten comfortable at home as well. I just had COVID not long ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Are
Luckily,
you
it
feeling
wasn't too
better?
bad of a case. Yeah, it was. It wasn't too bad. I was feeling better after about a day and a half. Uh, I went on a run for the first time the other day, and I was a bit like my breath was more shallow than I would have expected, and it was a bit scary because you don't know the long term impacts and whatnot, yada yada yada. But I feel fine, so fingers crossed, right?
How's your taste and smell? That's the thing I'm most concerned about.
Yeah, that was my biggest fear, and thankfully I did not lose taste or smell. No, not at all. There's a couple times I'd be brushing my teeth, and I'm like, "Is it minty? I can't tell." And then I'm just psyching myself out. But anyways, so clearly you're a bookworm, right?
Yes,
All the
definitely a
books
book
behind you.
guy. Hmm.
So what are you reading right now? What are you in the middle of?
Right now, oh man, I got this new book on science and cooking from the El Bulli guys. They did a course at Harvard and they finally wrote a textbook about it. So it's really interesting because it has some of their fine dining dishes broken down as a recipe to teach a scientific concept with food, but then it just also has some hard science in it as well. It's really awesome to see kind of uh, that collaboration between one of the best food institutes in the world with Harvard to to make it more practical, make it because cooking is science. It's so entertaining to me and so exciting and so much fun to understand what's actually happening and how you can kind of improve what you're doing with those little. I mean, it's stuff that really normal people don't think about or notice, but it is a little, like how can I cook mushrooms better? What I've been playing lately with this technique where you use a half a cup of water and let that reduce down to nothing, and then use oil and butter or whatever you're using because mushrooms are mostly water, and they will absorb a lot of oil, too much oil if you just cook them only in oil. And I've noticed that I didn't like that texture, that greasiness. And it's like that's a new thing I've been doing in the last few months. So there's always something you can learn to improve your cooking, or at least improve maybe how you're treating that, everything you've bought, that nice produce or piece of meat that you bought. How can I honor this animal or pay respects to this vegetable that is, nourishing us? So, as far as some other books, Let the People Pick the President. I'll give a plug for that. So, getting rid of the Electoral College. Um, I've been reading a little. Oh man, just a little everything. Man, look behind me. So I'm a big person that will read like 15 pages of a book and set it down for a while. So I have a lot of bookmarks on these books behind me, but it's mostly cookbooks. Huge cookbook fan. I love the history, the culture that you can get out of a cookbook. They can be art books, I believe, especially with these higher end books that come out, like Thomas Keller's new book per se, incredible. But then also on the practical side, nothing like a good bread baking book, or more of the New York Times cooking cookbook from 2007 with Amanda Hess. She does an incredible job there, going through the entire archive of the New York Times and delivering this tome of a book. I love going to it for ideas. All the dishes in there are amazing. You just find things that kind of were from someone else's life or family or restaurant, and suddenly they're a part of your like rotation. So I think that's so cool when you can see recipes be shared in a book and spread, because in compared to like other industries, I think it's awesome the sharing that happens with food. There's really no secrets because it's all about technique. So I could give you a recipe and we're going to make it completely different ways. And I love that about cookbooks, where people, they try really hard to like, set you up for success, but you still make it your own. And I think that's really magical.
And there's still room for failure. Yeah. I just got a cookbook for Christmas. That what you were talking about, the food science one. I haven't cracked it open yet or cooked anything from it yet. I just got it, but it's called the Food Lab. You might have
Yeah.
heard of it, but it's right on the cover and the back. It starts talking about the science of the food already, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. It's a different kind of aspect of it. But now that you've kind of explained it, it makes me kind of think about baking. With baking, you mess up one or two little things, and it could be an entirely different thing that comes out of the oven, right? Like you could have a flat piece of bread that didn't rise because you didn't let the yeast rise, or certain different things. Open the oven too early. So I feel like that's my favorite thing about food too, is that there's so much more complexity to cooking than most people even realize. It's not just throw it in the microwave, heat it up, or throw it on the grill. There's actual science behind how the food caramelizes, or like you said, the mushroom example.
Yeah, there's a
So
reason every recipe says between 300 and 400. That's when we get the best flavor development, that nice browning. Anything more and you're burning, anything less and it's not hot enough to get that reaction. So
yeah, I had a friend of mine that had this theory. I don't know if it was I don't remember if it was his theory or a theory he had read about, but essentially he talked about how back in the Neanderthal days, when we first discovered fire, uh, when we were able to start cooking our food instead of just like hunting and eating raw meat and vegetables that we could forage. The difference of being able to cook activated certain proteins in the food and changed the way we think, and kind of put us above as smarter people, because we were able to do decision making. You take this food, put it on the fire. Oh, it tastes a lot better, you know. So I think, what do you think? Do you think that food is kind of the birth of humans? The birth of how we started thinking.
well, this is a good
But
question. So
I mean,
in my research, I would say that the the cooking of the food was accidental, and over time, that's why we think it's delicious, because they're like, oh, this is good. This is the good stuff. This is what I need. And when you eat something that's a little undercooked, you're like, ugh. Like that was developed over evolutionary over time. I mean, imagine the first guy that ate bad berries, and his buddy's like, "Oh, note to self: don't eat that one. That one's off the list." Okay, so it's those baby steps. What I think your friend is getting at is not so much that we got smarter, or we just we are we were we gave we needed more energy to support this kind of like predator brain that we had. So we went that route instead of getting, brawny or whatever you want. And that still happened, but we were the ones that kind of survived on. And then we were curious. So you have people uh, carrying milk around and then accidentally making cheese and their goat skin stomach bladders for their liquids. Then you have the guy that left some barley out and it started to get a little funky and he's like, "Ooh, what's going on here?" So these like how do we get to wine? How do we get to cheese? How do we get to beer? Well, it's all fermentation. So understanding like the for them to
So
have
someone
no
just didn't throw some
scientific,
shit away.
yeah, like they
So
had
like
no
someone
scientific
just forgot to
grounding.
throw the grapes away. That's
they
funny.
they ate it like a maniac and they loved it, and then it's those little building blocks. Look at all the cheese we have in the world. Look at all the different varieties. Look at how each culture has a different relationship with dairy. Like in the Americas, people weren't milking anything. The only thing that they could milk were llamas. But in Europe, they were milking, and I would say there's a lot of evidence to kind of support that the Dutch and that kind of agricultural system, they were able to make more food that was rich to support people, full fully developed people, not people that were just making scraping it out, living more of like a peasant, whatever you want to call it, peasant life, just not as a well structured life. Uh, but the fermentation though, I think in the Stone Age or whatever you want to call it, the prehistoric days, just the fact that someone was able to figure that out was like, hey, I'm gonna ferment some beer because the water's bad here, and then we can mix some water with this and it's safe. Or them like how they just were able to intuitively know what was good and what was bad for us without having to use some reductionist science to tell us how much trans fat's in something. They just intuitively knew and created those cuisines in that culture because it's what they had, and that's what everyone we all try to, oh, I'm making something Indian tonight, or I'm making something from South America tonight. Well, this is just a story from a people's culture. That's all they had around them. This is what the best they could do with what they had, and I love that part of it. That like we get caught up. We have so many options now, but to think that 2,000, 3,000 years ago, man, what a time to be alive.
Yeah, and I mean that's probably the coolest part about cooking and food in general for me is that it's so cultural and like you said before, it's been passed down by generation after generation because damn, that tasted good, you know? And I think that's super cool. And in theory, eventually we would only have great food, right? Because the bad food would just go become obsolete.
Well, what makes food great though? I think it's different for everyone. It's that like cultural identity. It's a celebration of identity. It's a celebration of an animal. I think if someone with a Greek ancestry is going to find more pleasure and joy in that food and have that moment, of that means something else to them versus me trying it. I can't enjoy it the same level they do. I think it's important in America too right now. There's so much of our food culture and food history that was given to us by enslaved peoples. I mean, we took them here, and we had them. Americans had them cook for them. Uh, we've taken that culinary history away from them as well. A lot of the first cookbooks from that era would be the that had a had mistress of the house, the white lady, and it would be the whole book would just be from their cooks, other enslaved cooks. So there's I think a lot of work that can be done to kind of give back that culture and really understand that American food culture is is black culture. It's what uh, white settlers brought over kind of pales in comparison to the flavors and the cuisine that exists in the South, in the West now, uh, Latinx and Hispanic food as well. Like there's just so much going on here. Things from Asia, just where all these immigrants came from, all these traditions kind of collide here in a way that you don't see very often elsewhere in the world. And we should celebrate that. We shouldn't try to whitewash it and act like we had it all figured out the whole time. There's just uh, too many people that remain nameless without proper uh, credit for what they've given us.
I mean, the United States is a melting pot, right, for food too. So I mean, that's probably the coolest part because I remember I was talking about different kinds of food with my friends the other day, and we were trying to think like what's like traditional American food was, and we were trying to think of some things. It's like apple pie. No, that's not American. That's from Europe. And then hot dogs or hamburgers or pizza, and all of that didn't really start here. And so it's interesting to realize that we brought most of the food, like you said. So like, and even just crops, we brought all sorts of crops from Europe. You know, we didn't have a whole lot here when we came here.
Yeah, and well, specifically to that question, when you look, if you're trying to find like a book about it, James Beard spent the last half of his career really trying to like he went on a road trip, and that was what inspired him to kind of put its home together. It's called American Cookery, and it's his best attempt, but it's still, a white guy that is going around and collecting all those recipes. So it's really, we don't really have that like that Escoffier like tome of like, oh, this is our culture. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's better to have all these stories, all these small cookbooks, all these things, all these traditions handed down, because that's what America is. It's a bunch of little stories of people that gave up, left their land and came here, uh, involuntary or voluntary. We all ended up here, and everyone made a go of it, and everyone wanted to eat. So we got, I mean, look at the barbecue in the South. Look at like the Northeast, the chowders. Like anywhere you look, there's something that people are proud of. I mean, there's so many, like what is Rhode Island and the like lobster, whatever they were talking about with the politics of their like food day or what they're proud of. The squid thing, I don't know. Everywhere you go, and it's a good point though. Like apple pie is European, but at what point is it American? Because it's American now. I think it's and then you look at tomatoes that went to Italy. I mean, chili peppers came from South America, obviously spread with birds, and that's all over cuisine, especially in South Asia. And all those things are kind of new in the last 500 years. So they're what we think of as like, oh, that is from a specific area. You really start to get reductionist with it, and maybe a little bit like what are we trying to prove? Like I think it's more exciting to see the cross pollination and like understanding like why is the potato so popular here? Well, people didn't like it. They had to do cooking demos in Europe, in France to get people to accept the potato. But some of the most classic French dishes have that now. So it's really cool to look at like foodstuffs of history and see their their little history told. I know I have a lot of books like that on like orange, watermelon, salts is a great history to check out. Mark Kurlansky's book on salt is incredible. I mean, salt used to be worth its weight in gold. Without salt, you can't safely preserve and ferment and do those things to preserve food so you have it without freezing and refrigeration. I mean, freezing and refrigeration, that's a new technology in the last 150 years. And look at what it's gotten us to, and look what it's able to do with the vaccine. A deep freeze is able to make it so we can distribute this vaccine with dry ice and all that. So food, our food industry and the capacity, I mean, if we didn't have that, I mean, now we're getting to I'm kind of going off the rails here, but yeah, like overpopulation and that, it's like, so now we look to the future. How are we going to feed 8 billion people, 7.8 billion people on the planet now? Like what, there's just so, food impacts everything. Nothing is untouched by food. You can't have a conversation about fiscal policy, about healthcare. Food is, everyone has to eat, and you can't take someone's meal away or how they get their meal. You're gonna turn people into activists. I mean, look at humans' relationship with the water bodies around them. Like that is what pushed people to the new world, to Americas, even though people were living here before then. But they were fishing the cod, and they were fishing, and they went further and further east, and that's how some of the first people got, people from Europe got to North America, and arguably 20,000, 10,000 years ago, that's how people got over from Siberia. Is they were following the food, they were following the prey, and slowly kind of trickling down and using the waterways to travel around. Uh, that can't be overstated. The relationship with aquatic life and humans, and look at the impact we've had on the ocean. Since we can't stand there and see the devastation, it's so hard for people to like understand the health of the ocean, because you just look out and it's water, but there's so much going on there, and it's so important for the stuff growing in the ground. It's really incredible how interconnected the food chain all is, and how uh, simple it can be at the same time.
Pull out one type of fish, and all of a sudden you can't eat some other crazy kind of meat, like carnivorous meat that's like way up the food chain, just because so and so couldn't eat the fish, so such and such couldn't eat that. You know, but I think it's pretty incredible. If we had more time, we'd go into it. But anyways, do you have any last thoughts as a food scientist for the people to hear?
When you go to the grocery store next time, just think about the history of all these people that worked to solve all these problems that we have with food so we can not have food scarcity. The fact that we have full grocery stores, I mean, that's the what in the 1950s, the beginning of the Cold War, one of the lead Soviet guys, his job was to figure out how to build the Russian food industry up, the Soviet food industry up. And he came to America and went to a supermarket, and his mind was blown. And he took foodstuffs back like ketchup and bologna and things like that. And they adopted that. It was a part of their culture, like spam. So even when we think that the world is full of problems and there's like what can happen, what's going to happen with this, there's a lot to stress out about. Food still unites. Like we still opened our supermarket so the Soviets could see how we're feeding people, because I think it's a bottom line, no one wants to see people starve. And on the flip side though, we should enjoy our food as well. So next time you go to the grocery store, read what's going on. Actually read stuff. Vote with your dollar. Understand what you're buying. Think about where it's coming from. Think about who got it to you. Think about all those people that are in that food supply chain. We take it for granted. It's a modern miracle that we are able to provide and waste this much food. It's incredible, you know, but it's yeah, I love food. So go eat some food, guys.